Hey guys, tonight we're heading to a windswept little harbor in 19th century New England. Fog curls off the docks, a clatter of hooves on wet cobblestone fades into the gray, and the salty air hangs thick with the unmistakable scent of whale oil, brine, and hard work. Lanterns flicker softly against soot-blackened walls, and you're about to become one of the dozens of overlooked workers who make this whaling town function just barely. Of course, you probably won't survive this era for long. Between runaway carriages, drunk harpooners, and lamp oil fires, your odds aren't great. But hey, let's enjoy your fictional employment while it lasts. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what time it is there. So drop that in the comments if you're awake enough. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before the rooster even bothers. The town is quiet, save for the low hiss of waves brushing the wharf, and your fingers are already slick with oil. You are the lantern trimmer, a humble soul whose job is quite literally to keep the lights on. Every dawn, you shuffle through narrow alleys and crooked lanes, snuffing out half-burned wicks, trimming them just so, then refilling the lamps with precious whale oil. It's not glamorous. Your coat smells like you've been marinating in an old sailor's boot, and the oil leaves a sticky sheen under your nails no matter how often you scrub. But without you, the town plunges into darkness. And darkness, in a port full of drunken sailors, pickpockets, and open well holes, is a recipe for chaos. You pass Miss Andis's bakery, still shuttered. Later, her scent of sweetbread will tangle with the tang of fish guts and tar. But for now, only the occasional gull or creak of a swinging sign shares your company. Most of the lanterns are bolted to posts or hung from heavy iron hooks along the street. Some are stubborn, especially in winter wicks that won't light or glass that cracks with frost. You've got a pouch of tools, scissors for trimming, a rag to clean the soot-smudged panes, and a flask. Not for drinking well, not always. It's mostly for warming your hands. Historians still argue whether lantern trimming was a full profession or something tacked on to other jobs like watchmen or chimney sweeps. But in a whaling town where everything closes early and opens before dawn, it's essential. Especially since whale oil was currency here. Fuel, income, and sometimes even dowry. One spill could lose a family weeks of wages. Sometimes you spot strange things in the dark shapes vanishing into doorways. Shipyard workers slipping home after an illegal midnight unload. Or children trying to snuff out lanterns for mischief. You don't interfere. You're not paid enough for that. There's one corner where the lamp always burns too quickly. Locals say it's cursed back in 1812. A harpooner got caught in the ropes and was flung through that very lamppost during a fight. You don't believe in ghosts, but you trim that one carefully. Just in case. Around halfway through your route, you duck into the alley behind the inn. A crooked lamp hangs over the back door, dimming steadily. You reach up, hands steady now for repetition, and clean the soot-streaked glass with your rag. For a moment, the town looks warm again, like some flickering diorama. Soft gold light against wet stone. Then there's a crash, always a crash somewhere, and a burst of laughter. Probably that tavern lad trying to carry more tankards than he has fingers again. You shake your head and move on. A quirky fact. Some lanterns in wealthier parts of town were carved with personal family crests, little whales, anchors, even a suspiciously smug-looking duck. One widow insisted hers always be refilled with oil from her late husband's last catch. She claimed she could tell the difference by scent alone. You tried once to cheat with ordinary oil. She chased you for half a block with a fireplace polka dot. By the time the sun finally peeks over the sails, bobbing at dock, your hands are sore, your coat reeked of fishy heat, and your route is nearly done. A cat follows you for a few blocks, hoping for a scrap, and you tell it your woes. It does not care. Its shift is just beginning. You pass the apothecary last. He always nods, already mixing something foul behind the glass. Once, he told you a ship's boy had gone blind from sleeping near a cracked lantern. Some claim the vapor, others say it was pure exhaustion. You light the lantern outside his shop extra carefully now. You finish your round at the church steps, where the lantern flickers warmly under the steeple's long shadow. You wipe your hands, close the oil pouch, and sit for a moment on the stone rail. The bells will ring soon, and the town will wake. People will assume the lights came on like magic, but you'll know better. Hey guys, tonight we're heading to a windswept little harbor in 19th century New England. Fog curls off the docks. A clatter of hooves on wet cobblestone fades into the gray, and the salty air hangs thick with the unmistakable scent of whale oil, brine, and hard work. Lanterns flicker softly against soot-blackened walls. And you're about to become one of the dozens of overlooked workers who make this whaling town function just barely. Of course, you probably won't survive this era for long. Between runaway carriages, drunk harpooners, and lamp oil fires, your odds aren't great. But hey, let's enjoy your fictional employment while it lasts. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what time it is there. So drop that in the comments if you're awake enough. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before the rooster even bothers. The town is quiet, save for the low hiss of waves brushing the wharf, and your fingers are already slick with oil. You are the lantern trimmer, a humble soul whose job is quite literally to keep the lights on. Every dawn, you shuffle through narrow alleys and crooked lanes, snuffing out half-burned wicks, trimming them just so, then refilling the lamps with precious whale oil. It's not glamorous. Your coat smells like you've been marinating in an old sailor's boot, and the oil leaves a sticky sheen under your nails, no matter how often you scrub. But without you, the town plunges into darkness. And darkness, in a port full of drunken sailors, pickpockets, and open well holes, is a recipe for chaos. Due past Miss Annis's bakery, still shuttered. Later, her scent of sweetbread will tangle with the tang of fish guts and tar. But for now, only the occasional gull or creak of a swinging sign shares your company. Most of the lanterns are bolted to posts or hung from heavy iron hooks along the street. Some are stubborn, especially in winter wicks that won't light or glass that cracks with frost. You've got a pouch of tools, scissors for trimming, a rag to clean the soot-smudged panes, and a flask. Not for drinking well, not always. It's mostly for warming your hands. Historians still argue whether lantern trimming was a full profession, or something tacked on to other jobs like watchmen or chimney sweeps. But in a whaling town where everything closes early and opens before dawn, it's essential, especially since whale oil was currency, hair fuel, income, and sometimes even dowry. One spill could lose a family weeks of wages. Sometimes you spot strange things in the dark shapes vanishing into doorways. Shipyard workers slipping home after an illegal midnight unload, or children trying to snuff out lanterns for mischief. You don't interfere. You're not paid enough for that. There's one corner where the lamp always burns too quickly. Locals say it's cursed back in 1812. A harpooner got caught in the ropes and was flung through that very lamppost during a fight. You don't believe in ghosts, but you trim that one carefully. Just in case. Around halfway through your route, you duck into the alley behind the inn. A crooked lamp hangs over the back door, dimming steadily. You reach up, hands steady now from repetition, and clean the soot-streaked glass with your rag. For a moment, the town looks warm again, like some flickering diorama. Soft gold light against wet stone dot, then there's a crash, always a crash somewhere, and a burst of laughter. Probably that tavern lad trying to carry more tankards than he has fingers again. You shake your head and move on. A quirky fact. Some lanterns in wealthier parts of town were carved with personal family crests, little whales. Anchors, even a suspiciously smug-looking duck. One widow insisted hers always be refilled with oil from her late husband's last catch. She claimed she could tell the difference by scent alone. You tried once to cheat with ordinary oil. She chased you for half a block with a fireplace polka dot. By the time the sun finally peeks over the sails bobbing at dock, your hands are sore, your coat reeked of fishy heat, and your route is nearly done. A cat follows you for a few blocks, hoping for a scrap, and you tell it your woes. It does not care. Its shift is just beginning. You pass the apothecary last. He always nods, already mixing something foul behind the glass. Once, he told you a ship's boy had gone blind from sleeping near a cracked lantern. Some claim the vapor. Others say it was pure exhaustion. You light the lantern outside his shop extra carefully now. You finish your round at the church steps, where the lantern flickers warmly under the steeple's long shadow. You wipe your hands, close the oil pouch, and sit for a moment on the stone rail. The bells will ring soon, and the town will wake. People will assume the lights came on like magic, but you'll know better. You can feel the heat before you see the try-works. The heavy iron pots boil and bubble on the deck of the ship, thick clouds of steam and acrid smoke rolling over the rails and into your nostrils. The smell, it's a relentless punch of burning blubber, fish guts, and something else, something rank enough to curl your eyelashes. This is your world now, the slop boy's realm, where sweat and whale fat mix into a sticky fog that clings to your skin and clothes like a second. Smell your skin. Your job is simple in theory, but brutal in practice. You haul raw blubber giant, squishy chunks that feel like overripe pumpkins up from the hold, balancing them on your shoulder or dragging them by rope. Then you dump them into the huge iron tripots, where men stir them with giant paddles, keeping a careful eye on the heat. If the temperature climbs too high, the blubber burns. Too low, and it won't melt. It's a delicate science hidden in a sea of stench. You wipe your brow, grimacing as sweat drips into your eyes. The deck beneath your boots is slick with oil, and the ship creaks and rocks like a living beast. You have to keep moving. One slip, one missed step, and you might go overboard or worse, into the boiling vats. The captains yell constantly, their faces red as beets from the heat and the stress of counting every drop of whale oil. Historians still argue whether the Try-Works slop boy had the worst job aboard ship or if the outhouse cleaner's job took the cake. You figure it's a tie, mostly because you don't want either gig. A fringe theory, probably whispered by sailors trying to scare newcomers, claims that the smell of boiling blubber can actually summon whales closer to the ship. Scientific evidence is lacking, but it makes for a good story while you're hauling heavy lumps and gasping for breath. The sun beats down mercilessly, and you can feel your shirt sticking to your back in unpleasant patches. You're covered in sweat, grime, and more oil than you ever thought possible. Your fingers, once nimble, are now stiff from cold and overuse. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a pool of spilled oil and hardly recognize the grimy, exhausted person staring back. Every so often, someone shouts, "Incoming," and you brace as a barrel full of melted oil is rolled toward the deck's edge, to be lowered carefully into the hold below. Barrels clank and roll, threatening to spill precious cargo. You envy the men who get to ride the waves far away from the Try-Works. They might be miserable in their own way, but at least they're not drowning in stinking whale fat A quirky detail. On some ships, Tryworks slop boys had to wear special leather aprons sewn from old sailcloth, thick enough to protect from splashes, but thin enough not to weigh you down. Not every ship had them, though, and you quickly learn that being soaked in hot blubber without proper protection is its own form of punishment. The captain's voice cuts through the steam. "Keep it moving," he bellows, eyes blazing under his wide-brimmed hat. You shuffle forward, grab another lump, and climb the ladder back to the tryworks. Your muscles scream, but there's no time to rest. This is the engine room of whale hunting, a place where seconds matter, and mistakes cost lives. As the afternoon wears on, the ship's deck becomes a chaotic dance of sailors, barrels, and boiling vats. The smell grows heavier, and your throat scratches with the thick, oily air. You think about the dinners you'll miss, the cold bed waiting for you in town, and maybe, just maybe, the small chance of a better life. Sometimes, in quieter moments, you imagine the whales far below the surface, massive, majestic creatures unaware of the boiling chaos above. You wonder if they dream, or if the scent of their own blubber, boiling on a distant ship, ever reaches them in the deep when the sun finally sinks low, casting long shadows over the deck. You collapse against the barrel, hands shaking. Your skin still tingles from the heat, and your clothes cling like a second skin of oil and sweat. The ship's bell rings, signaling the end of your shift. You wipe your face with an oil-slick rag and glance down at your hands, blackened and cracked. Another day in the tryworks, another step in the grim ballet that fuels this town's strange economy. Before you head below, you remember an old sailor's warning: never fall asleep near the tryworks. There's a tale that some poor souls did, and woke to find themselves baked alive by the smoldering pots. You smile grimly and promise yourself to stay awake tonight. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You're back on solid ground now, but your day's not over. With hands still stiff from the tryworks, you settle into a cramped office tucked behind the bustling harbor warehouse. This is the domain of the blubber bookkeeper, an unlikely combination of number cruncher and oil-stained scribe. Your desk groans under piles of ledgers, ink-stained papers, and the occasional half-melted candle that smells faintly of burnt whale oil. The air is thick with the scent of damp wood, salty air sneaking in through the cracks, and that faint underlying tang of whale byproducts. Just to remind you where you work, your job is to track everything. Every barrel of spermaceti oil, every pound of blubber rendered down, every tiny scrap of whale baleen that passes through the docks. The merchants demand precise accounts, and the captains demand their shares. Mistakes aren't just frowned upon, they can lead to mutiny or bankruptcy. So you sit, hunched over your ledgers, quill in hand, tallying the messy, oily truth. There's a rhythm to it, an almost hypnotic sequence of numbers, weights, and measures. You've learned to spot discrepancies quickly. A missing barrel here, an extra ledger line there. You sometimes catch yourself daydreaming about the whales that provided all this wealth, their massive bodies reduced to numbers on a page. Historians still argue whether bookkeeping in whaling towns was mostly clerical drudgery or a subtle form of power wielded by those who controlled the ledgers, and thus the fates of men and ships. Your ink-stained cuffs are a badge of honor if you could just get them clean. The blotches never fully wash away, no matter how much soap or sand you use. Some say the stains keep the spirits of the whales close. Others say you're just lazy. You glance out the window and watch a crew wrestling a stubborn barrel onto a cart. The barrels, meticulously made by coopers, are the lifeblood of this trade, each one a vessel of fortune or failure. One cracked barrel can spill months of profit into the sea, and no one forgets that kind of loss. A quirky fact: in some whaling ports, bookkeepers used whale oil to seal ledger pages. hoping the slick surface would prevent ink from smudging during sea voyages. It worked about as well as you'd expect pages often stuck together or smelled so badly they made customers flee. You dip your quill again and note another shipment arrival. The captain's ledger is thick, but his handwriting is sloppy, and you suspect the numbers were cooked to hide a few extra barrels, sold off under the table. That's when the door creaks open, and the harbor master steps in, eyeing your work with a practiced glance. He grunts approval and mutters something about keeping the books honest before leaving you to your numbers and your quiet thoughts. The sounds of the town drift in a hammer striking wood. Sailors shouting orders, the distant toll of the church bell. You imagine the smells mingling the salty sea, fresh bread from the bakery, the ever-present hint of blubber and oil, and realize this ledger is the heartbeat behind it all. Before you pack up, you pull out a small, tattered notebook tucked away in your desk. It's filled with strange sketches and codes notations about barrels that vanished, rumors of secret shipments, and whispers of ambergris discovered in impossible places. It's the side of bookkeeping. No one talks about the clandestine network of secrets that binds this town together. You lean back, rubbing your tired eyes, and realize that while your hands may never hold a harpoon, your pen wields a subtle kind of power, one ink blot at a time. The salty breeze is sharper here, down by the docks where strange lumps bob in barrels and crates await curious inspection. You crouch beside a weathered chest that smells of seaweed and something far more mysterious. It's your job to examine ambergris, the floating gold of the whaling world, and decide whether it's treasure or just a smelly old lump of whale poop. Yes, you heard that right. Ambergris is a whale's gift or curse, depending on who you ask. It's a waxy, fragrant substance formed in the digestive system of sperm whales, often found floating on the ocean or washed ashore. You poke and prod the chunks carefully, rubbing them between your fingers to test the texture and giving a cautious sniff. If it smells sweet with a hint of decay, congratulations. You've stumbled upon a scent worth more than gold coins. You know this job requires a keen nose and nerves of steel. Some lumps smell so foul, they've been known to make even the hardiest sailors gag. You once had a rival appraiser who fainted after an especially pungent sample. You didn't laugh. Much. Historians still argue whether ambergris's value was mainly due to its use in perfume making, or if it also had medicinal purposes lost to time and folklore. Some even suspect it was traded as a kind of early currency in secretive circles. A quirky tidbit. In some ports, townsfolk would burn small pieces of ambergris in their homes, believing the fragrant smoke warded off evil spirits and bad luck at sea. Whether this actually worked or just masked the smell of rotten fish is anyone's guess. Today, you're also responsible for weighing the ambergris and certifying it for sale. The smallest misjudgment could cost someone a fortune or ruin your reputation. You've seen men grow rich overnight by finding a lucky chunk, and others ruin their health chasing the elusive prize. Your hands are stained with the waxy residue, and the smell clings stubbornly to your clothes and hair. You've learned tricks to mask it, rubbing lemon peels or burying clothes in the salt marsh, but nothing really works. You often find yourself daydreaming about the pallials that produced these lumps, wondering if they had any idea their digestive leftovers would become so valuable. There's a strange poetry in it. The sea gives, the sea takes, and humans try desperately to profit from both. A small group of sailors loiters nearby, swapping tales about ambergris's magical properties. Some swear it can cure ailments, others claim it brings bad luck. You listen with mild amusement, knowing that, like many whaling myths, truth and fancy mix like oil and water. You pack up your scales and carefully wrap the ambergris for transport to the perfumer's workshop, a place filled with exotic scents and mysterious bottles. You're always a little jealous of those who get to work with flowers and spices instead of smelly whale bits. as the sun dips low. You wipe your hands on a rag and glance out over the harbor. The water reflects golden hues, and for a moment, the odors fade into something almost beautiful. But then you catch a whiff of something rank, and you smile, knowing tomorrow you'll be back, sniffing and weighing the strange treasures the sea brings ashore. The clatter of hemp against wooden slats greets you like an old, sore friend. You step inside the long, low shed with its peaked roof and drafty walls, the rope walk. This narrow corridor, sometimes stretching the length of a city block, is where you'll spend your afternoon walking backward. Yep, backward. You're a rope maker, and today you're twisting thick strands of hemp into sturdy cordage for whaling ships that trust their lives to your work. Every anchor line, every sail tie, every harpoon rope, they all pass through your burned palms first. The smell in the shed is earthy and sharp. Dried hemp, beeswax, pitch, and your own sweat combine into something you won't be able to wash out of your shirt for weeks. Rope making is part science, part sorcery, and completely unforgiving. If your strands aren't twisted evenly or stretched to the right tension, they'll snap when it matters most mid-storm, mid-hunt. Mid-scream that you hitch the new coil of hemp onto the spinning wheel. Your hands already sore from yesterday's labor. The twist begins slowly, the whole line writhing like a stubborn serpent. You walk backward steadily, feeding the fibers in as the wheel spins. It's mind-numbing work, but oddly meditative. Step, twist, step, twist. You lose track of time inside the dusty glow of the shed. A rat scurries by your boot. You flinch less from fear, more from the knowledge that it's probably chewed through your lunch again. Historians still argue whether rope walks were more advanced in New England or if European ports held the edge in innovation. You'd argue that whichever one didn't have the moldy floorboards and the draft that whistles straight through your knees probably wins. A quirky note. Old sailors say some rope walks were haunted by the ghosts of snapped lines. Souls of sailors lost when your predecessors got a twist wrong. You don't believe it, but you still whisper an apology every time you hear a fray snap in the wind. You pass your supervisor, his arms like tree trunks and beard full of rope fibers, who nods without speaking. You've learned that rope making doesn't require much talking. Just your hands, your patience, and a high tolerance for repetitive motion injury. By midday, your fingers are raw. You pause only to chew a strip of dried apple, teeth still catching on splinters from the morning's work. Outside, the sound of shipbuilders hammering drifts through the narrow windows, and seagulls scream overhead like tiny, airborne bosses reminding you of your deadlines. In the far end of a shed, a novice is swearing his ropes twisted itself into a hopeless spiral. You remember your first day like that. You'd cried in the alley behind the cooper shop, then gone back in and tried again. The town doesn't have room for soft hands or fragile egos. Your best work is a harpoon rope you twisted last winter. So perfectly balanced and waxed, it still holds together on a weir that just returned from the Azores. The captain even mentioned your name, briefly, to someone else. While drunk. Still counts. There's pride in knowing your ropes might save a life, or at least keep a barrel from toppling into the sea. The town trusts you, even if they forget to say so. Sailors test your lines before voyages, tugging them like they're interrogating a prisoner. You just nod and let the rope speak for itself. One time, a rope snapped during a demonstration. Hit a merchant square in the trousers. He hasn't made eye contact with you since as the day wanes. The sun slants in through the dust, illuminating the fine haze of fibers that now coats your skin. You look like a ghost of hemp and beeswax, your shadow stretched long and lean across the wooden planks. You wind the finished coils onto pegs, stepping back to admire your work, not that anyone will. Tomorrow, they'll be gone, loaded onto some ship you'll never board. But tonight, they're yours. You flex your aching hands and step out into the street, your fingertips buzzing from the day's twist. A sailor nods as you pass, his line tied with your rope. You nod back, a quiet handshake of respect between calloused souls. The wind smells like blubber again. You sigh. At least ropes don't smell. You follow the hammering before you see the shed. It's louder than a blacksmith's shop, echoing down the lane like a drumbeat of wooden chaos. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of oak shavings, pitch, salt, and sweat. This is where barrels are born dozens a day, if you keep up the pace. You're a cooper now, and your job is simple. Make perfect wooden barrels or deal with the consequences when they leak. The shed is a cacophony of clanging iron hoops, rasping files, and shouted curses when a stave doesn't align. A stave, in case you've forgotten, is one of the curved wooden pieces that make up a barrel's wall. Get the curve wrong, and you'll have more than a leaky mess. You'll have to deal with a furious harpooner who just lost half a cask of whale oil on deck. Those men don't forgive easily. You select a pile of seasoned white oak planks. They've been drying in salt air for months, toughened and warped just right. You plane them smooth with long strokes, the shavings curling at your feet like ribbons. Each stave must be nearly identical, close enough to curve into a circle, tight enough not to leak, and wide enough to hold the town's most precious export. Hot. Stinking oil from dead whales. It's ironic, in a way. The cooper's shed smells better than almost any place in the whole whaling town. Fresh-cut wood, smoke, beeswax. Iron, but the things you build will end up stinking to high heaven. A journeyman beside you grunts, struggling with a stubborn hoop. He curses it roundly, then asks if you've seen his hoop driver. You haven't. You lie anyway. That's just the kind of day it's been. You knock the hoops into place, one by one, with a cooper's hammer that has worn a permanent groove into your palm. Each clang echoes through your bones, and still, it's satisfying. There's a rhythm to it, a sound that says, this is solid. This will hold. Historians still argue whether New England coopers were better compensated than their inland counterparts. Some claim the whaling economy elevated the craft to near artisan status. Others say coopers were just one barrel away from being replaced by anyone with strong arms and a sharp blade. You prefer not to weigh in. You're too busy shaving down another stubborn lid. Quirky custom among coopers in this town. The bottom stave of every 10th barrel gets a tiny symbol burned into the wood, sometimes a family crest, sometimes a joke, once even a rude cartoon of a rival ship's captain. You burned a miniature whale into one last week. No one's noticed yet. You glance over at the steaming cauldron where pitch is being melted. That's for sealing the insides of the barrels. The fumes are intense, almost hallucinogenic if you inhale too deeply. Once, a fellow cooper spent 20 minutes trying to hammer a hoop onto a chair leg. You've never let him live it down. The work is hard, but there's pride in it. Every barrel that rolls out of this shed will travel farther than you ever will to the South Atlantic, the Pacific, maybe even ports in the Indies. Your hands won't cross oceans, but your barrels will. And that counts for something. By late afternoon, the shed is sweltering. Your shirt clings to your back, soaked with sweat and sawdust. Your hands are a roadmap of cuts and calluses, and your knees ache from crouching. Still, you finish the last barrel of the day with a satisfied grunt and test the seal by pouring in a ladle of water. No drips. Perfect. You scratch your initials lightly into the base of the barrel. Nothing bold, just a whisper. A reminder that someone made this. Someone who smelled like wood smoke and sea air and hadn't had a quiet day in years. Outside, a boy rolls a finished barrel toward the dock, struggling to keep it upright. It wobbles, threatens to tip, but steadies at the last moment. You watch it go, a little piece of your day trundling off toward the sea. And when it sails away, stuffed with oil or pork or biscuit, maybe no one will think of you, but the barrel will hold. That's enough. You duck into the ship chandlery, just as a gust of wind rattles the wooden shutters. The place smells like oiled canvas, gunpowder, and something vaguely spicy, maybe cinnamon bark, someone traded from a Caribbean port 3 seasons ago. This dim, overstocked shop is your domain now. Welcome to life as a ship chandlery assistant, also known as the person who preps every ship in town, from harpooners to merchant sloops, and gets blamed when anything explodes. The chandlery is a kind of controlled chaos. Shelves creak under the weight of coiled rope. Brass fittings, wooden blocks, jars of lard, bundles of sail thread, replacement belaying pins, and stacks of ship's biscuit that have been here long enough to develop their own personalities. You navigate the maze like a rat in a cargo hold, fetching, sorting, packing, and occasionally ducking. You're still not sure why your boss lets you handle the black powder shipments. Technically, you're supposed to wear a wool apron and never strike flint within 12 feet of the barrels. In practice, the flint strikes happen much closer, and the apron is used to wipe your nose in winter. This morning's order list is as long as your arm. 2 harpoon ropes, 30 pounds of tack, 6 bottles of whale oil, 1 barrel of salt pork, lantern wicks, a replacement for a broken compass, and of course, 2 kegs of gunpowder. Well sealed, and don't let Johnny pack them this time. Johnny once accidentally shipped fireworks instead. Long story. Poor chickens. You hoist one of the kegs carefully. It thuds against your shoulder with ominous weight. Everyone in town knows a chandlery explosion would take out half the dock. There are whispers of a similar accident in New Bedford, blamed on a careless apprentice, though historians still argue whether it was sabotage, clumsiness, or just the world's worst candle placement. A quirky bit of lore. It's considered bad luck to whistle in a chandlery. A belief is that it mimics a rising fuse sound, and sailors are famously superstitious. One old captain once told you to save the song for the gallows. You haven't whistled since. You spend half the morning balancing on a ladder restocking shelves, tossing bundles of sail twine to the packers below, and digging through mislabeled crates. A single mislabeled container last week turned out to be opium meant for a doctor's shipment in Boston. It was hidden behind what you thought were pickled onions. You haven't trusted the food barrels since. Every customer has a different energy. Merchant captains are all about lists, measurements, and invoices. Harpooners? Not so much. One once paid for his supplies in carved whale teeth and a story so graphic you lost your appetite for 3 days. Your favorite part of the day comes in brief. Quiet moments checking off inventory with a pencil stub. Hearing the creak of the building settle like a sleeping animal. The smell of pitch warming in a tin bucket near the stove. There's something oddly peaceful in the order of chaos, but the pace never lets up. A crew rushes in shouting they need last-minute flares. A deckhand complains about spoiled biscuit again. A first mate demands to inspect every flintlock pistol you've got. You retrieve each one with calm fingers and a carefully neutral face. You've learned not to ask questions about why all the pistols. You also handle the ship logs, fresh journals for captains to scrawl their voyages in. You once peeked into one. It was full of crossed-out entries, angry ink smears, and a sketch of what looked like a whale the size of a mountain. That journal never made it back to shore. Your boss returns from the docks, carrying a dented sextant and a canvas bag of coins. He grunts a greeting, then starts muttering about ballast stones and those blasted tarps not being tarred. You nod. Pass him a flask of tea, it might also be rum, and go back to prepping the next order. As the sun drops low behind the sails of ships crowding the wharf, the chandlery begins to quiet. You sweep the floor with a broom that's more handle than bristle. gather scraps of twine and bits of dropped tack, and blow dust off the counter. The barrels of powder are stored for the night, though you still keep your bedroll far from them, just in case. Outside, the tavern lamps are being lit, and a warm light glows through the fog. But here in your cluttered little world of flints and fittings, the scent of powder lingers, and your ears ring slightly from hours of hammering and hammering, and hammering. Tomorrow, more ships will sail. More crates will be mispacked. And if you're lucky, nothing will explode. You step through the back door of the tavern, just as the violin screeches into the wrong key. No one notices. The place is alive with clanking mugs, muttered deals, and the slow thunder of boots on sticky floorboards. You're not here to drink. You're not here to fight. You're here to listen. Tonight, you're a hired Era Tavern listener for rent. A living, breathing recording device in the age before record players. You slip into a corner booth, arms folded, face neutral. It's a peculiar job, but in this town, information is just as valuable as whale oil and twice as slippery. Captains want to know who's smuggling. Merchants want to know which crews are turning sour. Widows want to know if their husbands are chasing whales or barmaids. So you lean back, tilt your mug just enough to look casual, and let the flood of gossip wash over you. There's a table of younger sailors nearby, fresh off the Virgil, already deep into their second round of gin. They're louder than they should be, tossing around tales of sea monsters, missing cargo, and a first mate who disappeared right after a storm. You file it away, gently sipping your flat ale. No one suspects the quiet ones in the corners. Historians still argue whether professional eavesdropping was widespread in whaling towns or just the side hustle of bored barkeeps and out-of-work clerks. But here, you're well known enough for it that some folks will buy you a drink just to keep you quiet. Others will tip you extra to lean in close. You used to feel bad about it. Then you heard what the harpooners say about landfolk when they think no one's listening. That cured the guilt. A quirky fact: there's an unofficial listener's chair in every whaling port tavern, always near a wall, never near the fire, with a solid view of the door and the drunkest table. You find yours tonight, nestled in shadows beneath a mounted swordfish, snout and a faded painting of a storm dot. Your real tools aren't pen and ink, they're memory and instinct. You catch half conversations, cross-reference them with other whispers from the week before. A barkeep mentions a ship taking on more powder than usual. A cooper drinks alone and mutters about a secret compartment in one of his barrels. You store it all. You once caught wind of a mutiny before it happened, quieted it before it even made the dock. That earned you a bottle of brandy and a handshake from a very relieved ship owner. You also heard a story about a hidden cache of ambergris buried under the chapel floorboards. Still haven't found that one. Yet that you watch a couple argue near the hearth. She's got the sharp eyes of someone who knows her sailor husband is up to something. He keeps glancing at the door like the sea might walk in and drag him away. You don't know the full story, but you make a note to ask around the docks tomorrow. Sometimes people talk to you directly, hoping you'll pass it along. A young lad boasts loudly about spotting an unregistered ship offshore, just loud enough for you to hear. He wants it to spread, wants to be noticed. You'll give him his wish, with a few edits. The tavern's old beams groan in the sea wind, and your chair wobbles just enough to remind you this place has been here for generations. You wonder how many secrets the walls have soaked in. If they could talk, you'd be out of a job. Near the door, an older man in a salt-stained coat slumps over his drink. He's got the look of someone who's seen too much or hasn't slept in days. You edge closer, casually, and catch fragments. Harpoons snapped, eyes like lanterns. Crew never the same. Probably nonsense. Or a future storm. You make no judgment. You just collect. A whisper here, A warning there, sewn together like patches on a sail dot. By the time the oil lamps gutter low, your head is full. You slip out the back before the closing shots begin, coat collar up, boots quiet on the cobblestone. You don't write anything down. You don't need to. Every story finds its place, waiting to be traded, slipped into the right ear, at the right time. And you know tomorrow, someone will come looking, not for ale, but for answers. You walk past the last row of houses where the shutters stay drawn, even on bright mornings. Past the leaning picket fences and laundry lines, hung with salt-stiffened linens. Beyond the town proper, at the edge of a wind-swept bluff, where grass turns wild and stones poke up like crooked teeth, you arrive at your quietest job yet. You are the grave tender of the lost at -C. Here. The graves don't always hold bodies. In fact, most don't. They're memory markers, carved names for men swallowed whole by the ocean. No remains, no coffin, just the unrelenting tide. Their families still need a place to mourn. And so, someone must keep these empty graves neat. The stone faces readable, the soil clear of creeping moss. That someone is you. You carry a worn satchel filled with your tools, a wire brush, cloth, a little oil for polishing the engravings, a small knife to scrape away lichens, and sometimes a folded note or flower left anonymously. You don't ask questions. You just tidy them up. A fresh gale from the Atlantic pushes against your coat as you kneel at the first stone. Captain Josiah K. Weeks, 1803 to 1847, lost near the Cape Verde Islands. His name is faint now, worn by decades of weather and grief. You brush the salt dust from the letters, murmuring your usual greeting. Some folks think it's strange to talk to stones. You found it stranger not to. Historians still argue whether towns like this truly saw these symbolic graves as sacred spaces or just public reminders of the sea's price. But here, in this field of names with no remains, it feels sacred enough. One of your stones has a curious carving, a weeping whale, unusual and possibly unique. Locals say it marks the grave of a young boy who fell from the rigging on his first voyage. No one retrieved him. The sea kept him. His mother designed the headstone herself. You polish it carefully, tracing the grooves with your cloth, whispering a small apology no one hears but the wind. You know which graves belong to families who still visit. You keep those especially tidy. Others haven't seen a visitor in years, their names lost to time or long-gone bloodlines. But you still clean them. You still say hello. A quirky tradition you've kept alive, leaving a seashell at each grave after cleaning. You place it carefully, different each time: clam, scallop, whelk. Sometimes a piece of driftwood that looks a little like a boat. No one ever takes them. Some even return the favor. An anonymous someone left a perfect white nautilus on the grave of a deckhand named Ellis years ago. You never figured out who. You straighten one of the wooden crosses that leans toward the cliff edge. The earth here shifts a little each year, inching closer to the sea. One day, it might take the whole graveyard. The townsfolk joke about it nervously. You just nod and move to the next stone. Near dusk, you reach your favorite, if that word can be used here. It's not the oldest, nor the fanciest. Just a plain marble slab with the name Miriam T. and the year 1831. No last name, no date of birth or death. The story varies. Some say she was a sailor in disguise. Others say she waited too long for someone who never returned and finally walked into the sea. The marker appeared a few weeks later, without fanfare. You oil her name gently and place a blue mussel shell at the base. The wind gusts again, tugging at your hat, and you imagine briefly that Miriam whispers something in return. You don't catch the words. That's probably for the best. By now, the sun has dipped low. staining the horizon with golds and purples that ripple on the waves far below. The town is just a suggestion behind you, its chimneys soft against the twilight. You pack your satchel, clubs stiff from salt and use. You take one last look at the field of names and not quite resting places, at the crooked rows and weathered markers and the wildflowers growing where no one planned. And you listen to the wind, to the crash of distant surf, to the hush that settles only here, where the living keep watch for the ones the sea forgot to return. The breeze slows now, softening into gentle breaths over the cliff's edge. The grass shifts lazily in the fading light, and the carved names behind you blur into shadow as dusk settles across the bluff like a comforting quilt. You walk back toward the town at half your usual pace, letting the last light of day spill across your shoulders like warm oil. The lamps are lit again, those same ones you trimmed and filled just days ago. Their amber glow flickers in the mist, turning cobblestones gold and stretching shadows into lazy, drifting ribbons. You pass familiar corners, alleyways thick with bone dust, doorways that reek faintly of blubber, shutters behind which secrets were quietly traded. And yet the town rests. Even in its busyness, it rests. You pause near the wharf, listening to the sway of ships rocking gently against their moorings. The barrels are quiet now. The try-work's cooled. The ropes hang slack. Everything is still. You've seen the whole town by now, the blistering decks, the soot-stained ledgers, the backroom whispers, and lost sea prayers. You've carved, hauled, sniffed, stirred, twisted, and listened. And now, at last, you've laid it all to rest, just like those names on the hill. So, take a long breath, letting the sea air fill your chest. Exhale slow. Let your shoulders drop. Let the rhythm of waves below pull you gently toward sleep. You don't need to do anything else tonight. You've worked enough for 10 lifetimes. Let the sound of the tide tuck you in. Let the scent of salt and lamp oil drift behind your eyes. The town is quiet. The sea is wide, and your home. End of script. Sweet dreams.